And also their own vote was holding up in some of their sort of key support as well.
Well, an extra set of results for the Tories in lots of places. The loss of all bar one of the 11 mayoral contests, defeat in the Blackpool South by-election with a massive swing to Labour, and third place in the council elections after the Lib Dems in terms of the totals. The Prime Minister is fond of saying, stick to the plan, but if voters don't seem to like it much, what now? Well, Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, is with us this morning. Thank you for coming in. You're warning of a wipeout or a political earthquake. Why?
The plan's not working, and I despair at these terrible results. There's no spinning these results. There's no disguising the fact that these have been terrible election results for the Conservatives, and they suggest that we are heading to a Labour government, and that fills me with horror. I love my country, I care about my party, and I want us to win. And I'm urging the Prime Minister to change course, to, with humility, reflect on what the voters are telling us and change the plan and the way that he's communicating and leading us.
If it's that dire, why not change the leader?
Listen, I just don't think that's a feasible prospect right now. We don't have enough time, and it's impossible for anyone new to come and change our fortunes, to be honest. There's no Superman or Superwoman out there who can do it. Rishi Sunak has been leading us for about 18 months. He's been making these decisions. These are the consequences of those decisions. He needs to own this, and therefore he needs to fix it.
What does he need to do differently then? You say he must change course, but what would that look like?
I think the problem is that our voters are on strike. They're not coming out to support us. We've seen that with the turnouts, and we've seen that by losing Conservative strongholds. When I was knocking on doors in the Midlands, in London, in the South Coast, Conservative voters were saying to me very often, we're lifelong voters of your party, but you're not a Conservative party anymore, and we can't vote for you. So what does the Prime Minister need to do? I think he needs to show people that he really cares about some of the things that he's talked about. He needs to actually lower taxes in a way that people will feel, not tweaking around the edges. If he's serious about migration, he needs to put a cap on legal migration. He needs to take us out of the European Convention on Human Rights. That's how you actually send the message that he's serious about stopping the votes.
But where's your evidence that those kinds of changes would make any difference? Because Rishi Sunak has cut taxes in the last few months. He has hardened the laws on migration. He has, by some people in your party, moved too far to the right. So where's your evidence that a further move would get your voters back?
The evidence is that people are not voting for what he's doing because they don't believe that we are serious about some of these issues. They don't believe that we're serious about some of these issues because they don't feel the benefits. On tax cuts, if he made a bold and big offer on cutting income tax or raising the personal thresholds, people would actually feel the benefits of those tax cuts because we're tweaking and we're just tightening some of the nuts and the bolts in a complex system rather than actually making a meaningful offer to people. People are not convinced by what we're saying.
But where the Conservative Party's put up a candidate who appeared to many people to be on the right in London, she lost.
Listen, in London, we lost because of the National Party's mismanagement of the process. They botched the selection process a year ago, and then really speaking, they didn't run a good campaign. The candidate was unsupported, and that's why we lost.
Are there ministers in government who share your view? That
yes.
All is, yes.
Of course. I talk to many of my colleagues who are privately demoralised and incredibly concerned about the prospects. We are, at this rate, we'll be lucky to have any Conservative MPs at the next election. And we need to fight. And I'm not willing to give up. It does me no favours to come here and say it how it is and to set out the difficult situation that we're in. But I owe that honesty to my colleagues. I owe that to you and the British people who are crying out for a Conservative party to vote for.
Except I think some of our viewers might feel this morning, and some others in your party might feel, actually, it's people who have been criticising the Prime Minister in public, people who have been playing political games and thinking about their own futures that are part of the problem here.
I reject that. Listen, I'm not in government. I'm not making the decisions on our policies. I'm not there putting forward legislation to ban smoking and to vote on pedicabs. We voted more on pedicabs and on banning smoking. I voted against it. Than we've voted on meaningful healthcare reform or fixing social care or improving mental health care. we are not delivering for the people. We're not delivering the policies that people want. And it's a disgrace that we are trailing up against Labour, led by Keir Starmer, who has the charisma of a peanut, who is overseeing a party which is a rabble of hard left maniacs, who would undo Brexit, who would open our borders, and who would indoctrinate our institutions and our schools with politically correct madness.
But given all the changes
we shouldn't be trailing to the degree that we are against this Labour Party.
But given all the turmoil you've had, all the changes of leader, all the noises of all the civil war, all the belly aching, do you believe, though, that there will be viewers thinking, actually, it's the Conservatives who are a rabble? And can you tell us, was there a plot being discussed to get rid of Rishi Sunak this week if everything was bad? And is it over?
What I would say is that there's no point blaming those of us who are telling the truth for the problems that we're facing. As I said, I'm not in charge. I'm not in government. These decisions on policy and communication and campaigns are being made by Rishi Sunak and his team.
Was there a plot?
I don't. You tell me. I read what you read in the papers, and if you know the papers and journalists seem to like this subject about plotting and plotters.
Well, it's important because it's about who's going to be the Prime Minister of our country. Do you regret backing Rishi Sunak?
Honestly, yes, I do, because I had assurances from Rishi Sunak that he was going to put a cap on legal migration, that he was going to do something about the European Convention on Human Rights, that he was going to fix this transgender ideology in our schools. He hasn't done that. I want our party to win. I want us to beat this feeble Labour Party, and I want to save our country from Keir Starmer. I'm not going to give up. I'm still going to fight, even if it makes me unpopular. I'm going to speak the truth, because that's what the 400 councillors who we lost this week deserve. That's what the authorities that we lost this week deserve. We are not going to fix this problem unless we're honest about it and we change course in reflection with some humility to what the voters are telling us.
OK, Suella Braverman, thanks very much indeed for coming in this morning, and we'll be putting your points to Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, in a few moments. Before we do that, let's just remind you what happened this week in all those contests around the country and what they add up to. We've asked the pollster Luke Trill to give us his 3 top trends, and we start with the by-election in Blackpool South. Well, Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, has been taking it all in. Thank you for coming to see us this morning. You'll have heard there Suella Braverman, your former colleague, has essentially said you have to change your approach or you're going to die when it gets to the general election.
Well, it's 2 aspects to that, I think. First of all, I mean, you obviously had a piece on polling there. If you look at the analysis that Rawlings and Thrasher have done, acknowledged experts, it says that the performance over the last few days means we're looking at a hung parliament, so Labour wouldn't get a majority. That's a better position. That means the election's outcome's closer than the polls are suggesting. So my read from that is it's all to play for. The election isn't a foregone conclusion, and you shouldn't take the voters for granted.
You're saying it's all to play for.
So it's all to play for.
All of these councillors around the country, you've lost everything apart from the mayoral election results.
Yes, I think the national equivalent vote share, the analysis that's been done by Rawlings and Thrasher and that thing there showed that it's closer than the national polls. You shouldn't take the voters for granted. It's everything to fight for. There's a lot to do. I absolutely acknowledge that. On the point about policy, I think the Prime Minister is focusing on what the country's priorities are. So that's about reducing taxes on working people. We've done that twice already this year. That takes time to feed through. Focusing on stopping the boats. We've got the Rwanda legislation on the books, and now we need to see flights taking off. And then the final area is obviously priorities on reducing waiting lists for the National Health Service. Those are the country's priorities, and those are the Prime Minister and the government's priorities.
But you say you're focused on the country's priorities. The country is telling you at the ballot boxes that it doesn't like what you are doing. It doesn't want to choose the Conservatives at the moment in all sorts of different contests, in all sorts of different corners of the country. And from both sides of your party here this morning, from Paul Scully, who would, I think, say he's a centre, moderate Conservative, and from Suella Braverman, they have both told us very plainly, now is the moment where you have to show humility, you have to take a breath, and you have to do things differently.
Look, I'm not going to pretend that the election results over the last few days were disappointing. They're disappointing to lose hard-working local councillors. I was particularly disappointed by the nail-biting, narrow result yesterday in the West Midlands.
Obviously, it's disappointing to lose good, hard-working Conservative councillors. I'm focused completely on the job at hand.
To you, scoop getter extraordinaire, Pippa Crerar, political editor of The Guardian, and former Labour Cabinet Minister Jackie Smith.